Hello and welcome to the Clockwork Noodles. This is episode 9 breakthrough of the Golden Kamuy season 3. And before we get into the absolute amazing episode, which was probably the twist of this season for Golden Kamuy, let's get the boring stuff out the way first. Make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel. I have very shortly got going up my winter 2021 anime list, what I intend to be covering next season. Also, I will be including my top 3 anime for fall 2020. Is Golden Kamuy on that list? I wonder. That will be going up at some point within the next 2 weeks. I just need to run it past one more line of checks before I commit myself to it. But it's a very interesting list, and I have got some interesting shows that will be taking place next season for me to break down. If you did not already know, there is a Discord server for the channel itself. It will be a place where I end up growing once we get a little bit bigger, so we're not quite big enough to do anything with it, but the main perk of that is you get a notification whenever any of my videos go up online, so you never miss a video and you get to stay looped in case there's ever a delay or anything. So make sure you guys go ahead, check that out and give it a like. This week's episode is definitely a turning point and also one of those WTF moments. And I feel really, really stupid because right up until the big reveal, I didn't think it was him. I am very shocked, and we'll talk about it as we go down, but I feel really stupid for not even suspecting that this character, who is introduced to us and it seems a bit random, had any big importance. And of course that's me being stupid because this is Golden Kamuy. Characters are generally introduced for a reason. That was one hell of a twist. There's a big following for that particular character on this channel. This is your episode, I guess. This is the big week for you guys to see his background arc covered. This week's episode was revolutionary, where we open back at the Akko prison. We do get a brown filter upon Kiro. This signifying that we're going to be dealing with some stuff from the past, some flashbacks. Generally, a brown or yellow filter gets used whenever we're dealing with a flashback, just because those are the colours generally which represent age. We see Sophia writing in her prison cell, and she is writing in invisible ink. Presumably she's using lemon juice because a guard comes in to check on her, where she eats the container holding the ink. Most likely to be lemon juice, because lemon juice is one where you guys can even muck around with it yourselves, that if you write in lemon juice and then hold it to a light, it eventually shows up brown because it burns. We see Team Sugimoto once. It's a very, very quick sequence. Team Sugimoto is finally at the Ainu camp where Ogata had headshot the reindeer. So it's been a while. These are the guys that obviously helped them over the border as well. I think the grandfather was the one who got shot in the head. So those guys are probably still, presumably, are over the border in Russia recovering from that attack. But we are at that same camp, and there is a man there who recognises Asurupa's picture. But this does show us how far behind Sugimoto is. There is quite a fun, cute little moment, one of the only few cute moments of the episode, where we see Koito, almost like childhood fantasy coming true, and he is over the moon because he's seen a tiny reindeer and he is absolutely ecstatic. Where I love the fact that he goes to Tsukizuma, I saw a reindeer, and he's like, cool, good for you. I love it. A nice little link back to when we had the episode with Asurupa at the same camp. Shiraishi was the one that they decided to pin a reindeer bridle to. They even said, let's make it line up with his dick. That moment there. This time, in this episode, it is Sugimoto who decides that he wants to threaten Koito by putting a bridle upon him. Oddly enough, we just get a moment, it probably doesn't mean a great deal, but Tsukizuma zones out, which leads us into the bit where the Team Sugimoto are now on their sleds and they are now going over the border. So they are very far behind, but we finally see them heading over the border. The big question of the season, I guess, is are they going to catch up in time? Will they make it in time for the big prison break that is going to go on at Akko prison? Back at Akko itself, we find out that the largest populous ethnic minority group in Karafuto are the Nivke. I'm going to have it on the screen. I am definitely going to massacre the name of this one, but hopefully it's on the screen. These guys are very similar to the Karafuto Ainu, Their whole culture centers around fishing. I am with Asirpa on this. Asirpa sees the most awesome hat. I love that hat. I don't know why. I like hats with ears on them. Do I have a hat? I think I have a hat with ears on. Definitely have a cat hat with ears on, which I like to wear during the winter. The guys go back over their plan. We are going to be breaking Sophia out of the prison. Hopefully, we're going to uncover some information about the gold, about Wilk, and also we're going to help Sophia's men who are also locked up with her out of the prison, which will hopefully serve as allies to Kiro. Kiro ends up reading the letter that we saw written in the first sequence of Sophia. As Siripa says, will finding the gold, with their help, benefit the Ainu? We do get quite a moment where Agata shoots her quite an interesting look before Kiro then butts in and says, yes, it will. It's going to benefit all the minority groups within Russia, and all these groups will now be able to remain themselves. Because we do get a bit more background information behind his actual motives this episode, because we get a good look at the group Kiro, Wilk, and Sophia's backstory. Even though, very cleverly, the anime is masquerading another character's backstory within their backstory, because I've simply thought nothing of it. I was like, this must just be us focusing in on the backstory between Wilk, between Kiro, between Sophia, because obviously it's very important for us to understand how those guys learned Japanese and where those guys came from, what they did during those 10 years of killing the Emperor. It didn't even dawn on me that there is probably another character very important within these scenes. We get quite a fun shot now where it is nighttime at Akko Prison. I like the fact that it is a full moon covered by cloud. Generally, full moons represent the truth coming out. They're often shown when the truth and a situation is being unraveled. We finally get to hear the truth. However, in this sequence, the cloud covers the moon. Basically means the wool is being pulled over someone's eyes. And we do see our tired Knight's Guard man, and he is approached by Tsuraishi, who is disguised as a prisoner. So he has the half-shaven hair that we heard about the prisoners having. And he walks past him. And the Escape King is apparently also the Breaking King as well. And he ends up passing a bag to the prisoners. And he then disappears down a hole back under the wall. Sophia opens the bags to find the native clothing within the bag. That is where we enter our fun flashbacks beginning, where the important backstory starts without me even realising it is a very important backstory. Also, quick note back to Shiraishi himself. Shiraishi's a character who's always got very shaven head. He doesn't have a great deal of hair. Often enough, I presumed it was because he'd been in and out of prison so much, he just didn't have any hair anymore, and he just didn't grow it. Because obviously most of the time, some prisons do just shave off prisoners' hairs. So whether he's wearing a wig to have that second half looking super fluffy, I believe he is wearing a wig because he doesn't often have that much hair. I think he is wearing a wig, which is just a fun little detail there. And I have got to praise the absolute detail here where we enter on an upside down image of Vladivostok. It is a flashback and it took me a while to work out. I think it was up until the next point it was a flashback, because I initially thought this was just a photographer. It's not just a photographer! This guy is important! I am emotionally affected right now, guys. Most old cameras, especially the old ones, will reflect an image upside down. I do have a nice camera. It is mirrorless, so the image is naturally portrayed in the camera normal way round, but most of these old cameras would have the image portrayed upside down. So this is a very nice little detail. Our photographer ends up hearing a wolf howling. I first thought this was Retta. It's not, because this is a flashback and it can't possibly be the same wolf. Perhaps it is related to the same wolf. The photographer, our magical photographer, who I am just gonna avoid using his name for now just because I haven't quite got over it, he ends up going to grab his camera to take a picture, and this is the typical turn of events for any wildlife photographer out there. As soon as you see something, you grab your camera, it's gone. So the wolf vanishes. We are introduced to Hasegawa photographers, and we meet Koichi. We find out is Japanese, and Fina is his wife, who is Russian, with their child Olga. Koichi finds that he has a guest, and lo and behold, also solidifying the fact that these characters now know each other and have got that backstory there, Wilk, Kiro, Sophia, all young versions, have come to see him. we've seen a young Wilk already, so he wasn't the biggest little shock moment here. But the young Kiro looks really, really nice, and I think we have seen him a few times, but we get a nice, quite clear image of him, and he's in this quite a bit as a young version of himself. It looks fantastic. We get to see Sophia's younger, prettier version, and Sophia is the one who tells them we are not here for a photo, but we have learnt that there is a Japanese person here, and we want to learn Japanese. Of course, it is a paid position as well. Amazingly, transitions from a young Kiro to an old Kiro, because we are flashing in and out of this next sequence. Kiro is telling a Siripa the tale, and obviously they use Kiro as a point to flash back to the young version or the old version. I do like the transitions we get this sequence, very, very nicely done, where he starts to say that Hasegawa went to Russia as part of his father's job, where he married the local woman, and he agreed to teach them Japanese as well, which apparently was a nice break of change of pace because the guys had been on the run for 10 years for killing the emperor. Sophia, we find as well, treated Kiro as a little brother. As is the norm with most people learning any new foreign language, we get to see everybody starting to abuse the bad swear words. Mostly in my classes, because I took German and French, people would they would abuse the fact that there were swear words in French. And this is pretty much that sequence where Kiro tells us that he says he likes fat chicks, but essentially it's plump women or larger, he likes a larger woman. Although the only thing going through my mind at this point was Queen's Fat Bottom Girls. So definitely a song I think Kiro would appreciate nowadays. We see Sophia calling him poop. Maybe she's trying to say the S word. We just see how childlike the relationship between Sophia and Kiro really is. I did note it could be an act because they're trying to obviously act like normal people, try not to arouse suspicion from Koichi. You're not Koichi! Wilk acts as the middleman, and we also learn that they're all using fake names. So Wilk is called Grigori, and we learn that he's a very fast learner. Sophia is going under Zoya. Koichi says that she's not cut out for Japanese, but it's actually Fina who says perhaps Sophia has no interest in learning Japanese. And again, back to those upside down images, which are absolutely fascinating. Time passes a bit and we see an older Sophia holding Olga, who has grown a little bit of hair. So it does show us that time starts to pass a little bit, where we get to see Wilk and Kiro interacting with Hasegawa, Koichi, in neither, to be fair. Wilk teaches them all about pelts and how you can catch pelts and you can save it for money, where Koichi's like, I should put traps everywhere to try getting a new camera. And this is where Wilk surprises Koichi and probably starts to trigger a few little red flags within that man's mind, where he uses a phrase that obviously he hasn't learnt from anywhere: don't count your hoinu before they hatch. AKA, you don't count your chicks until they hatch, because obviously you don't know if the eggs are going to hatch or not. He's very surprised by him using this phrase, but they are interrupted by a twig snapping in the woods, where Kira and Wilk both go to their quick defensive positions, which Koichi notes that both of them are always constantly on edge, always looking around at their surroundings. We find out that it is a wolf which has broken a twig, and Koichi tells us it's the same wolf that I saw the day that I met you guys. Wilk tells us that wolves are absolutely beautiful, and this is a very nice link. It links to the relationship that we've seen with Asiripa and Retta, and he also tells us that a lone wolf means there is something wrong with the wolf, whether it's sick or whether it has just a bad attitude where it was kicked out by the rest of the pack. And that is when Koichi starts to question the pack. He even says that Sophia, aka Soya, is nobility. She is able to read, write Russian, she can even speak French, and he notes that the two men are not nobility. We cut to old Kiro telling Asiripa about Zoya. So obviously we kind of transition in and out when there's a little cut point like this. We use this transition to tell Asiripa about Sophia being an upper-class Russian, and apparently upper-class Russians would prefer to speak French, and they would sometimes dress as peasants to live amongst them. And that does cut to Koichi holding the wanted posters, which, now that I think about it, actually sheds a bit of light on a certain person having those wanted posters a few episodes ago, arranging that ambush over the border. I'm going to talk about it all at the end because I want to get it all out my system at the end. So getting through the anime first. We then cut back to an older Kiro again telling us that there were often these serfs who had no rights within Russia, and these were the people that Sophia was trying to get to uprise. She ends up failing and it doesn't end up working, but those are the people that she ended up going for. And he gives us a bit of a history lesson, telling us about the growing line of thought that ends up leading to the assassination. He says Russia is a threat to the ethnic minorities, and it's because their beliefs are at threat. So eventually they'll all end up being converted, and that is when Wilk and Kiro decided to join the cause. Their main goal is to free these ethnic minorities from Russia's hold and allow them to continue being their own individual minorities with their own beliefs, which we've heard a few times. That is his actual motives. Those are the goals which Wilk and Kiro are fighting for. We enter nicely into a section where Koichi decides to liken all three of them to the men who are at the core of the Meiji Restoration period. He then says to his wife, "You must go to your parents and stay there for a bit and do not come back until I come and get you." We find out the group are nearly ready to head to Japan. Things are starting to step up a few notches now. And it's a very clever way because the anime subverts our expectations. When we see the secret police passing Fina when she walks out, I'm like, ooh, they must be here for the group. To be fair, they continue to subvert our expectations they show us Fina finding Wilk's wanted poster on the ground, just to lead us down a bit of a red herring path, which is very cleverly done. And that is when our group comes to Koichi asking for another lesson, and Koichi says, "You must leave and never return." The secret police end up knocking on the door, where they are looking for Hasegawa, which should have been the little red flag to me, but it never made any sense that they were here for him. And the building is now surrounded. Sophia ends up knocking the man out at the door, and we get quite a brutal scene, which I can't really show, with Wilk beating the crap out of him. That is when the secret police reveal that they're not actually here for Wilk or Sophia or any of the three of them. They're here for Koichi. It turns out that Koichi is a Japanese spy, and Fina, his wife, had no actual idea that she was married to a spy, and she had a child with a spy. She never even knew his actual name. We start to see the group dispersing the secret police. Koichi, it makes absolute sense now that I've seen the weapon. It all starts to make sense now that I'm reading over my notes with that knowledge now what I had at the end of the episode. And he reveals his secret weapon. Of course he does. And it's all hidden within a camera. And it is this amazing Gatling gun. This gun is huge. It really does put a new take on shooting a model, because, shooting a model and shooting a model. Okay, moving on. Kiro ends up mowing the rest of the men down, where Wilk is shown to be... He does a few headshots. He ends up trying to be Ogata for this sequence, where he kills the man in the head, and then he ends up saying, "We need to leave no survivors." And amongst the rush, which is where the sad little moment comes in, Sophia ends up shooting Fina and the child. To be fair to Sophia, she is in absolute tears. She is in remorse. She is really emotionally affected by this. That is when we see Koichi telling them to go. He is left holding his dead family within his hands, where we see Wilk having to drag Sophia away, who is in tears. This transits to Team Asuripa, now standing along the Strait of Tartary. They're standing on the Strait of Tartary, which is covered in ice floes, and we are told it connects to Karafuto. We are also told this is the passage that Team Wilk took all those years ago when they were trying to escape from this situation with Koichi and his family being shot. So that's the route they took to escape. We transition to Wilk and Kiro standing in the exact same spot, perhaps on the other side. There is a yellow filter, so we do know we are back in flashback territory. And Wilk says he has some information on the Russian government, where they need to go to Hokkaido to see if it is true. And that is when Sophia breaks the news that she cannot go with them. And Sophia tells Wilk, "I love you." But she is haunted by the baby that she killed, and she decides that she wants to stay where she is and fight as a revolutionary. So it is the departure of Wilk and Kiro from Sophia. As they depart over the floes, Wilk does say, "I promise we will meet again," which we know never occurred. And that is when Asuripa even asks Kiro, "Did you tell Sophia what happened to my dad?" Kiro informed Sophia via letter that Wilk had died, and that's where we also see her shedding some tears. We are seeing a different side to Sophia. So far, she's been represented as quite this hardy woman who is pretty much a hardcore killer if she wants to be. But that's not necessarily the case, and she has been haunted by the fact that she has got an innocent life, two innocent lives killed. The plan now, once Sophia is rescued, is to cross over the Strait of Tartary and head into Russia, where we will meet up with the Allies. And this is the most probably important thing we learn from the entire episode. We cut back to Athena, who is somewhat close to her death now, being held by Koichi, where Koichi tells her, "My name isn't Koichi." And when she asks, "Who are you?" I'm just so shocked. It is none other than Tsurumi Tokushiro. Yes, this is a very, very, very young version of the Captain Leaky Brain. This is the man himself. I literally didn't suspect a thing. Because to be fair, we've already seen a flashback with the young Tsurumi, and this is an even younger Tsurumi. So I don't quite know how old the guy is, but we've seen three different stages of his life now. Athena ends up dying as she learns his true name, where Tsurumi embraces his dead child, and that is when we see him burning his house down, walking away with quite the serious look upon his face. Next week's episode is named Catching Up to the Wolf. Does this mean our teams are catching up? That is the question I have on my mind. I'm very excited to see if the two teams are catching up finally. I'm just speechless right now at the big revelation of Tsurumi's background, because I never even suspected it was him until he took the glasses off and I actually had to squint. I really had to squint. And then I could go, oh, it is him. I'm still to this point going, it doesn't quite look like him, but again, the Tsurumi I'm used to has a lot of facial hair. So even when we saw the not so young Tsurumi in the flashbacks in the trench with Tsukizuma's backstory, he still had facial hair. And if anything, he looked better in that version than he does as a younger man. Never even crossed my mind that we were actually looking at the backstory of Tsurumi, and it's because it was so cleverly done. And it again, the genius that is Golden Kamuy. It hid his backstory within the backstory with Wilk, Kiro, and Sophia. So me, who's an anime only, I was like, oh, this week we're having the backstory to Kiro, Sophia, and Wilk. Very interesting episode in general, even if we had just left it at that. But no, it was actually hiding the fact that Lieutenant Tsurumi knows Wilk, he knows Kiro, he knows Sophia. Does raise a few questions whether Tsurumi knows where Kiro is going. Or maybe he knows that Sophia is in prison. Obviously, we saw Tsurumi, I even questioned how he got the wanted poster of Kiro. Because he had them back in the day, back in that sequence, we see him picking up the wanted posters. That literally just clarifies all those little missing parts where I questioned how much reach this man had. Now we know he was a spy in Russia. We also know that Tsurumi knows who Kiro is. Obviously, that's why the ambush was set up. And he knows who Sophia is. He knows the group in general because he spent a lot of time teaching them how to speak Japanese. So it's going to make the next few episodes very interesting to see if Tsurumi is going to pull this out. Last season, we had quite a few groups all vying to try finding the skins. Tsurumi's group was a very active group. This season, we've seen Tsurumi only really babysitting poor Nikaido, who has lost his ears and his hands and his legs. And poor Nikaido is feeling very, very sorry for himself. And we've only really seen Tsurumi standing in the shadows, pulling a few strings, but those strings are important. He was able to set up the entire sequence with the sniper versus sniper, with Ogata versus Vasily. We saw that attack over the borderline, and we can see that his reach is very, very far. And to be fair, we've obviously got Koito, we've got Tsukizuma, who are with Team Tsukamoto right now, who are basically serving Lieutenant Leaky Brain. It's just absolutely fascinating now to see that there is a lot more to this man, and very interesting to see that he did love his wife and child, because I think he did, and I think it's quite difficult because initially Koichi seems quite taken when he sees Fina dead on the ground with his child, but he does end up kind of embracing his child, and he does tell Fina who he really is before she dies. So it's nice to see a very different side to him in general, because no offense to all the fangirls who absolutely love Lieutenant Tsurumi, He just comes across as a complete, utter madman at times. And this is where we're seeing maybe the madness sprouting from. Maybe the death of his child and his wife, maybe that had an effect on him. Who knows? Obviously, he had to keep his identity secret from them. But at the same time, I think he would be hard pushed to say that he didn't care, at least. I think he definitely did. To be fair, it has been one hell of an episode. That twist at the end, absolutely mind-blowing. Wasn't expecting it in the slightest. Now makes the next 3 episodes left of the season very heated and makes me wonder if we're going to see a return of that character. He must know that Akiro is going to be attempting to rescue Sophia. He has to know that. Right until this point, we've only really seen him stuck in Hokkaido still. Whether he is going to make an appearance or whether it will be indirect with Koito and Atlock working for him, absolutely fantastic to see the sheer lengths this man has at his disposal. And it's been a fantastic episode where we get to look at a very intriguing character. As much as he's not my favourite character and he does scare me quite a bit, but he is nonetheless one hell of a well-written character. His character is so well-written that I am interested to know more. And I was shocked and I was there screaming when I worked out who he actually was at the end. And it's so cleverly done because it wasn't one of those characters where you could look at and go, oh, that's a young version of him. Like, Kiro looks like Kiro. Often enough, you can look back at a younger character and go, oh, that's definitely him. If I look back at the completely young version of Tsurumi, I never thought it was him. I wasn't tipped off. Like, I could tell from the flashback in the trenches with Tsukizuma's background, that was Leaky Brain. I knew immediately, without the headplate or anything, that's still the same man. But the very, very young version wasn't expecting to have a second character reveal from the past. So I've already said that this season we've seen a lot of backstories, we've seen a lot of younger versions. We've seen two younger versions of Tsurumi now. So it has been one hell of an episode. I need to go and scream in a corner for about half an hour because of the actual implications this has. So shocked. And the fact that it was Tsurumi who taught Wilk how to speak Japanese. Absolutely mind-blowing stuff. Golden Kamuy likes to keep reminding me why I've put it suddenly in my top 10 anime of all time. And yes, it finally has made its way onto my top 10 anime list of all time, just because of the story writing, the attention to detail, the sheer genius and love that goes into this anime. It's finally on my top 10 list. It had. And you guys are absolutely fantastic to talk to. I love talking to you guys. I know that we have quite the big Lieutenant Tsurumi simping club going on, which is fantastic. I've also got the fact that you guys don't get angry when I say that I'm very interested in Ogata as a character. A lot of people don't like the character, and I have originally had some hate for really being interested by the character in general. I am very interested in a well-written villain, and this anime in particular likes to write its characters in a very interesting way that even the morally grey, darker characters are fascinating to read about, fascinating to watch. Whenever they're on screen, I am literally glued to the screen wondering what the hell they're going to do next. We only have 3 episodes left, and it's sad we are coming to the conclusion, but I think we're gearing up for one hell of an explosive ending. Cannot wait to see where the season leaves off. Gonna be sad when we end up having to wait however long for season 4. So, make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel. We have got winter 2021 approaching quite fast. About a month now, 36 days before the first few seasons air. Obviously, Attack on Titan airs in 11 days. I will be watching it. I am a huge Attack on Titan fan. That also in my top 10 animes of all time. But I will not be releasing on it just because such a tiny channel like myself, I will simply just get buried by all the bigger channels who are definitely going to be airing this season on it. So I have taken the decision not to air upon it, and I'm going to wait for the new season. And I will tell you guys that there are now a possible 4 anime I will be releasing upon next season. So make sure you are subscribed so you get a notification when that goes up. Still reeling from the twist at the end. Need to go scream in the corner for a bit, guys. Monday release, we have Moriarty. Tuesday, we get our Golden Kamuy, where I will catch up with you guys to see if we are literally catching up with the 2 teams now. Is catching up with the Wolf, both teams catching up, or does it mean something completely different? Maybe it does, maybe it's a metaphor. Wednesday morning, Ikebukuro Westgate Park fills the screen. Wednesday night, we see No Bleeze. Friday, we get our Journey of Elena. Stay safe, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.